Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the GG Report. I'm your host, Godfrey Geshoke, and this is another exciting moment for us. As usual, the GG Report is, a platform for big, bold, honest, deep conversations on a broad range of subject matters, political, socio-economic, philosophical, theological, and everything in between. And today we're going to have a very interesting conversation. We are talking about good governance, lessons from around Africa and indeed the world. And I have a special guest with me on the set today, Mr. Gilbert Gesu. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Very good to have you here. Far too many African countries are plagued by bad governance that has produced unending conflicts, corrupt regimes, economic crisis, hunger, and poverty. That's the story of Africa. How can Africa be governed better? That's the big question we want to ask ourselves. And what are the governance failures in Kenya? Because we must bring it to our local context. And how can they be resolved? Now, my guest is Mr. Gilbert Gesu. He's a long-serving senior governance advisor to the United Nations. Mr. Gesu has served as a UN senior official in many platforms: election monitoring, mediation, reconciliation, and that has happened in different countries: Liberia, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Ethiopia, East Timor, and others, and he will tell us more about that. Mr. Gesu completed his PhD in refugee studies and politics of conflict at Zurich University in Switzerland. And I'm going to be asking him how comes he doesn't carry the name doctor before his name. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But we are here to dive into this conversation, conflict studies, and Africa dynamics. And the heart of it is the whole discussion around good governance. So, Mr. Gesu, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to have you here.
Can I call you Mr. Gigi?
Yeah, Gigi, Pastor Gigi.
Pastor
you
Gigi.
know, that's...
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor.
So I carry that, cap.
All right.
And so I'm very, very happy to have you here. And I really think that you have a lot to tell us so that we can understand our context. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us about your career and how you got to where you are.
Okay. When I think about my career,
yes,
I think of the very first, do I call it a spark of passion for service, but without knowing how I was going to get to really serving mankind. And so locally, after my university, from University of Nairobi, I was employed by the Kenya Women Finance Trust.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I worked briefly. I was a credit extension officer. My job involved interviewing mama mbogas and especially just women and qualifying them, qualifying them for credit from KWFT.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for a short time, won a scholarship from the Aga Khan Foundation.
Okay.
Went to the UK, came back, and I went to Daystar University for a very short time, also 1 year. Then, being a young man, you have so much impatience. I wanted to go back to do my PhD, but they told me you have to wait. I don't know, it was 7 years or 13 years, I can't remember. And it was too long for me. When you are in your early 20s, mid-20s,
Yes.
it's too...
7 years is too
7
much.
years or even 13 years is too much.
Yes.
Because I was thinking by the time I'm 30, I must have my PhD, or before I'm 30. Actually, I was saying by the time I'm 27, 28. But of course, I quit without a plan.
Okay.
A few months later, I was employed by Kenyatta University. It was actually 3 months, I think, as a tutorial fellow. And I taught sociology for a short time. Then after a year and something, I got discouraged again because I had done an interview for a scholarship and it was given to others and I wasn't given. And I knew I had qualified. So I quit and I left Kenya.
Okay.
I went to look for opportunities elsewhere. I actually just left. I went to the UK, through contacts I made when I was a student there. And within a short time, then I moved to Switzerland.
Okay.
Where I had somebody, I'm sure you know, a very close family, people there. But I can mention Professor John Beatty.
Okay.
The late Professor John Beatty.
Okay.
And through his guidance and support from other people, members of family, I was able to stay there for a while.
Okay.
Got into the system there, got a job, working with the refugees, with the Swiss Refugee Council, and of course my idea of studying was still in my mind. I had to study German. I had to study in Kenya, official language in office is English. But in the streets we speak Swahili. So I had to study also and understand Swiss German. But German, what they call High German is what I had to study, which I did qualify to go to university. And I was admitted there.
Okay.
And I stayed there for a while, did my studies, and got a job, of course, working with other organizations. With the federal government, basically guiding them on how to deal with refugees from Africa.
Okay. Okay.
And during that time, of course, it was a beautiful time because my subject was politics, conflict, and I was concentrating on Africa, refugees, and how they find themselves in Europe, and how the law treats them in Europe.
Okay.
So during that time, I still being a young guy, I got impatient again. And I used to take breaks from my studies, go and do some work for UN as a UN volunteer.
Okay.
I would go for 3 months, come back, 4 months, come back. During that time, I went to Sierra Leone. I believe the first time I went, we did elections there. That was 1996.
Okay.
We did elections. And I went back, continued with my work, completed all my academic work, passed all the exams, everything. And just before I graduated, I was given an opportunity to go to East Timor for 3 months.
Okay.
So I talked to my professor, who was my head of department. At that time, I was giving, lectures. I was giving tutorials to bachelors, and basically they don't have a bachelor's degree. It's like they call it Grundstudium.
Okay.
That is basic course students.
Okay.
And then the master's degree students. And I did my, I did that as part of my qualification, as part of my training.
Okay.
As part of my doctoral research, I had to do that. So I was working at the university. At the same time, I was now working with the federal government, helping them support African refugees in the country.
Okay.
And that, of course, meant traveling across Switzerland everywhere to talk to refugees who had issues.
Okay.
But then, again, I felt I needed to take a break because Switzerland is a very constraining country. It's small. extremely clean. They wash the streets with soap. It's not a joke. They have machines which wash the streets with soap and water, and they have a mentality they used to. I don't know whether it's still the same. I think now with the internet and everything, they have expanded.
Yeah.
But even those days, there was the internet.
Yeah.
Because it is the 1990s, late 90s, up to 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
They did have a system where they felt like their country was the center of the world. And you would understand them because they're actually in the center of Europe.
Okay.
They were very, and they are still very neutral. They don't take sides with political conflicts. They give a very big, name to themselves by being neutral and by attracting all the international organizations into Switzerland.
Okay. UN in particular.
UN in particular.
Yes.
And a lot of other agencies, they have their headquarters, European headquarters in Switzerland.
All right.
In either Geneva or Zurich or other places.
Yes.
And, while there, I got an opportunity now to go to Indonesia. Okay. I was again by United Nations volunteers, 1999.
Yes.
And that was after I had handed over all my academic work and everything had been passed and everything. And my professor told me, 3 months, you can go, come back. Of course, as I had done before, I went, but I never went back.
Your professor is still waiting for you to come back and submit yourself to the final paperwork, and then perhaps you can graduate.
No, we had done all that.
All right. Anyway,
he didn't have a problem with what
I like that, and I think because you are a practical man, you decided, look, let me just get on with the work. That's the most important thing.
With the life, basically.
And with the life.
Yes.
And so I think I like that background, Bwana Gilbert, and the fact that you worked with the refugees. You're at the very heart of conflict and what they produce, because conflict seems to produce, obviously, all kinds of things, and chiefly the most visible is the refugees. So let's now come to Africa. So you went to East Timor. You were involved in the election process.
In the election process. Actually, it was the referendum.
Okay.
Because that time, I said I went to Indonesia because that time it was part of Indonesia.
Okay.
So I was involved in the referendum process, like South Sudan did. And their choice was between being autonomous within Indonesia or choosing to be independent. And they chose to be independent by 99.98%.
Wow.
Overwhelming.
I think I used to hear those conflicts going on. They would come in the news.
It was a very harsh kind of reality for me at that time.
Yes.
Although I had gone through other situations like in Cambodia, but East Timor was, for me, extremely traumatic. And the trauma wasn't for me. It was maybe for me in a small way, but for the local population. Because I saw suffering like I've never seen before.
Okay.
People had to run from their homes because their homes were targeted and touched. The country was burned from east to west, north to south.
Wow.
In fact, in the village where I lived, headquarters of a district called Los Palos.
Yes.
The corner which remained unburned was because petrol got finished.
Oh my God.
It was the Indonesians who were doing that because they were very annoyed that the Timorese had voted for independence. But of course, they had their local collaborators like everywhere.
Yes.
Even in Kenya, we had the Home Guards, right? So
you always have local collaborators, people who enable criminality. Yeah, okay.
I mean, we have local collaborators to press down the expressed will of the people.
Okay.
And that's what happened in East Timor.
Right.
But for the 25 years, the Timorese were fighting and doing all manner of things and refusing to agree that Indonesia occupies East Timor. Yeah. Because Indonesia had walked into East Timor in 1995 when Portugal left. You remember, Portugal had colonies in Africa, in Mozambique, Angola, and East Timor.
Okay.
Those were the last colonies, actually.
Yes.
In Africa.
Okay.
Right? And the Portugal didn't do what the French did or what the British did. They just packed and left. They didn't ensure a government. was in place before they left.
Okay.
That's why we had war in Angola, in Mozambique, and in East Timor. In East Timor, when they left, the Portuguese left, the Indonesians, the neighbors, walked in.
Okay.
And
Because
they
there was
took charge.
nobody looking after anybody.
Yes.
And there was no government.
There was no government. So the Indonesians came and they said,
We are your bosses.
this is was it the 14th or 15th province?
Yes.
And they took charge. But the Timorese resisted that.
And I think one of the points you're raising there, and it ties to the key issue we are discussing here, governance. So even the idea of the independence of a nation, how a nation can become independent, beginning from the will of the people.
Yeah.
We the people. So
Yes.
if the people decide we want to be free, we want to form our own free republic, they are entitled to that. And you paint a very grim picture of how the Timorese were able to emancipate themselves. Okay, so it's a big story. We'll pack it there.
That's a story for another day.
It's a story for another day.
Yes.
And then Sudan, Southern Sudan had to do the same thing.
Yeah.
They decided we want our own independence.
Yeah.
How much do you get involved in that? And maybe briefly, how was it?
My colleagues went, we had a chance to go briefly.
Yes.
But that time I was now based in West Africa.
Okay.
And my colleagues went for what the UN calls TDY, temporary duty.
Yes.
I didn't go for that.
Okay.
But of course, our views, we used to write opinions, we used to talk to people. I remember I was consulted.
Okay.
And I did write through the UN. In the UN, you cannot write your own story. You send it through the offices.
The UN system, yes.
So we did send and share our experience from East Timor, which in a way prepared the South Sudanese. And the Sudanese were South Sudanese were voting for exactly the same thing, either to stay within the big Sudan or to break away.
Okay.
And they chose to break away, to become an independent state.
Absolutely.
Which I think is okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Liberians.
Yes.
So tell us about Liberia. What were you doing in Liberia? What was the story going on? We are talking about all these conflicts.
In Liberia, you remember, in fact, maybe even before Liberia, I should talk about Sierra Leone.
Okay.
Because I worked in Sierra Leone also. Where politicians cannot agree. And when I talk about this, I become a bit emotional.
Yes.
Because I think in Kenya, Kenyan politicians should really understand that conflict destroys a country. Before we get to Liberia, Sierra Leone used to have a government which was like a kleptocracy, if I may call it so. I mean, a small group of people, the Creoles, who are like descendants of slaves, they came to Freetown. The name Freetown is very telling. They came there because that's where they were freed from America, UK, other places.
Yes.
And even other countries. And they had their language. And it was a very kind of high society government where other people who are not Creoles were excluded.
Okay.
You see that? So excluding locals from government.
Okay.
For a long time. But of course, these locals eventually went to school. The military got involved. I'm sure we know about Strasser, Captain Strasser, who overthrew the government. He was a young man at 28.
Okay.
And he took charge of the country, and because he was a local guy, or I don't know whether he was a local or he was a Creole. I think he was a Creole.
Yeah.
But he was extremely localized.
Yes.
He was a Mutiachini.
All right.
Because he was a captain.
Yes.
And he had above him all those other senior officers.
Yes.
But they had to salute him as head of state.
Okay.
That country went into war, into, conflict because of, with a military coup because of the poor attitudes of those who are in leadership.
Okay.
Governments which are governments of excluding the public, the populace,
yes,
always end up on the wrong side of history.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a very powerful thing to say. In other words, we must be very careful how we run our republic.
Yes. Yeah. We must be very careful. We must be very careful what we pronounce as politicians.
Yes.
You know, like in Kenya, sometimes I've actually wished I could sit with some of these politicians, and they're very senior. Some of the things they say are not things which are good for this country.
Yes.
And for me, you know, actually, I always say 2007, 2008 was a very telling moment, because as a practitioner and somebody who had gone around the world, I saw the conflict coming.
Okay.
And I even informed family members and friends. I told them, please go and stock up food, dry food, mahindi, maharagwe, you know.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I remember I went to the supermarket, Nakumatt, those days.
Yes.
They used to have green vegetables which are dried.
Yes.
So I bought a lot. I bought containers of water. I usually would even take a month, 2 months, sometimes 3, from my job to come here during the elections.
Yes.
Because I wanted to observe.
Yes.
That time I had taken like 2 months break. And I came, and I was convinced, because I used to watch our local TV. You know, you can get it online.
Yes.
I used to get it, actually. I had a decoder from here.
Okay.
Which I took to West Africa.
You
And
had
I
it
could
in
watch.
Switzerland?
No, not out there.
Yeah.
Here,
Yes.
in West Africa.
Yes.
And I could watch.
Yes.
That decoder at DSTV, you can watch anything.
Yes.
Although there are shows where the circles are, but no, it works everywhere. So I could watch Nation, Citizen, KTN, you know, all those stations, KBC, I can't remember, but I used to watch all of them.
And you see how we are.
And I saw, because those things you see, I saw Kenya was going to have problems. So I warned people. I couldn't talk to any politician that time.
Yes.
Because I didn't know Kibaki. President Kibaki, Marehemu, the best president we ever had, if you ask me.
Okay.
I couldn't talk to Baba Man, you know, Raila.
Yes.
I didn't know him.
Yes.
I couldn't talk to other politicians. I couldn't talk to Ngilu, who was my MP at that time.
Okay.
You know, I'm from Kitui Central.
Absolutely.
I couldn't speak to current president, Bwana Ruto.
Yeah.
You know, President Ruto.
Yeah.
I couldn't, because I didn't know him.
Yes.
So I felt constrained by emotions and disappointments, because I could see things going wrong. And the solution was so completely obvious. And you know what the solution was? Let the will of the people prevail.
Yes.
That was the solution. It's like Marehemu Mzee, I really respect a lot. Matiba used to say,
Yes.
let the people decide. Let the people decide.
I like the way you are summarizing Kenyan
Yes.
politics.
Yeah.
As long as it is the will of the people.
Yes. There
Let's
will be
live
no
with
problem.
that. Let's live
We
with
can
that.
live with that.
Yes.
There is no problem.
Absolutely.
I can tell you that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the rest is there are details.
And the other thing is this. You know, I'm sure we are coming to those kinds of things, but let me say this before it escapes me.
Yeah.
Elections. I've done elections in Africa, in Europe, in Asia. And I can tell you this. No, not in Europe. I did other jobs in Europe, not elections.
Yeah.
But in Asia and Africa,
Yes.
quite a number of countries.
Yes.
And I can tell you this. An election which is well conducted, it cannot be contested.
Okay.
Right? So where an election, where you work with the candidates from A to B to C to D until, you know, results are declared,
Yes.
there can be no quarrels.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm saying that because I've been involved from the nerve center of elections. My first electoral experience was in Cambodia. I worked there for more than a year,
Yes.
preparing the country, doing everything. And eventually I got deployed to my region, where I was in charge of, the electoral process, everything, logistics, everything. You know, my staff recruitment, even international observers, when they came, I was in charge of that. I was a young boy. 1992, I was a very small boy. I was a very small boy.
But you're managing elections in Cambodia.
I was in Cambodia, and maybe my personality got them to appoint me to head a huge area.
Yes.
And I had Wazungus, Wahindis, all these people, Africans working with me and locals.
Yes.
I had a staff complement of more than 100.
Wow.
With international staff. And then also international observers, when they came, they had to report to me.
Okay.
And of course, I could see some of those Europeans who came from very almost racist countries wondering, how do we have an African here, a young little boy coming to show us? But they realized that I had done my homework.
Okay.
Because when you work with the people anywhere, and you are neutral, and
Yes.
I wish our institutions here were neutral,
Yes.
we wouldn't have all the problems we have. We never had problems in those countries. I did elections out there. I did elections in East Timor. I did in South Africa. No problems.
So what you're saying, Bwana
And I did in West Africa, and even here locally, I did elections.
what you're saying is,
But I was a kid here.
yeah,
Yeah.
what you're saying is,
Yeah.
this fallout with the IEBC thing is a very, very ugly,
Extremely.
regrettable, unfortunate.
Extremely. And it's a shame that from 2007 until now, every election has been contested.
So,
If we actually had a proper, well-managed organization where there was no interference from the executive or from other politicians, where money was not a factor,
yes,
and people just did elections the way they are supposed to be done,
yes.
we wouldn't have problems in Kenya. And I believe we must prepare ourselves to give a genuine electoral process to this country. Otherwise, Kenya will burn.
Hold it there. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I don't want to interfere with my guest because he's giving us absolutely amazing information and helping us understand how Africa is shaped. So we're going to go into a short break. When we come back, we continue from there. This is the Gigi Report. Stay tuned. Don't go away. Take a coffee break. We're coming back shortly.